And we're live. Welcome to today's stream. My name is Matt Price, your host. And a couple quick housekeeping notes before I introduce some of my esteemed colleagues. One new one you may see there below me. We are simulcasting on LinkedIn Live, YouTube Live, and X, formerly known as Twitter. So wherever you're watching from, if you have any questions throughout today's live stream, please ask those. We'll do everything we can to answer them live. We certainly value feedback and questions, so let's keep this interactive. Without further ado, Anthony, what about this awesome jacket I see you wearing?
Ooh, you noticed, Matt? So, yeah, I'm rocking the latest Object First swag today. Not my typical Hawaiian. It's a little cold in Florida, so I had to put on a jacket. This never happens. Hey, guys, glad to be back. Just in case you don't know, I'm Anthony Cusimano. I am the Director of Technical Marketing here at Object First. And it's so good to be back with y'all today. But more importantly than me and my cool jacket, I am so freaking excited to introduce the newest member of the Object First team, Mr. Sterling Wilson. Sterling, tell him what's up.
Hey, everybody. Man, it is such a pleasure to be here. Working with some of my esteemed colleagues to come here and talk to you about why, what you think about, with your customers, where you actually can place Ootbi, why we're actually purpose built for some of the ingest streams we're talking about. Yeah, as you know, I've been in the data management industry for quite some time. Been a data center engineer for a long time, and I just couldn't be more excited to be with you guys here today. Thanks.
Heck yeah.
That's awesome. So, the topic of today's session is if you've got Veeam, let's talk about that hardware refresh and, what happens when hardware becomes end of life and potentially reasons you need to look at refreshing that hardware before it comes end of life, just based on what's going on in the market, in today's world. So let's talk a bit, Anthony, about some of the previous reasons, that drove customers to buy storage when they were looking at a repository for Veeam. And, the first thing that comes to mind being an ex-Veeamer for, over 10 years is, a lot of things that Veeam built and innovated really revolved around random IO and having a very fast recovery mechanism with instant recovery, with data labs, with sure backup, all these powerful capabilities where you couldn't just back up to a tape and hope that it worked, right? Your initial Veeam repository had to have some horsepower and some bandwidth behind it, right?
It's interesting, Matt, when you think about just the idea of storage refresh in general. We're talking to our partners here today, or potential future partners. Storage refresh means likely 3 years ago was the last purchasing decision, maybe 5, right? Like we're talking a span of time in which we have just completely changed as a society. If you think about like 3 years ago, Bitcoin was worth a lot more money. TikTok didn't exist. We were just getting into COVID. Like things have changed dramatically, both from a societal and a technological perspective. And it's wild to think how much can change in a 3-year window now in the world of tech versus what it was just 10 years ago, right? Like things evolve and we have to grow and shift at a rate that is just unfathomable. I mean, the biggest one is AI, right? Like literally in the last year, we saw AI go from something we mostly talked about in science fiction movies to something that kids are using to write high school papers. So a huge jump. And that is all to say that the storage that we bought 3 to 5 years ago is probably not up to snuff compared to what we need today. And I think we're going to get into this later. So I just kind of want to set the stage here. Think about the kind of things we were looking for 3 to 5 years ago when it came to storage, right? Like if it was generic, if it was fast, if it kind of just fit in my environment and it worked with all the tools I was using, it was probably good enough for the job. But since then, things have really become targeted, right? We're looking for purpose-built everything. When we're looking at cloud, we're looking for cloud-native applications and functionality and utility. When we're looking at backup, we're looking for specific features and functionality that's tied to backup now that we wouldn't have looked for in the past. Things we might talk about like immutability, security, the concepts of zero trust. These are all things that might have been a nice to have, but we're definitely not like on the checklist. And Sterling, I know you're the newest member here, so you've probably got the most insights about what's going on outside of Object First. But do you agree with what I'm throwing down here?
Absolutely. If we skip back even 10 years, which you were talking about, really was all about sort of that onset of virtualization and the different ways of ingesting those backup streams, not using the agents, making sure you're getting it. And when it came to a recovery, can you spin that back up quickly?
Mhm.
Can you make sure that that data sort of is solvent in the way that somebody just deleted the file and bring it back? Today's needs, we have different type of attack vectors, different types of surfaces, and of course, different ways that we have to go and rehydrate that data. I mean, today we're putting that data in different clouds. We're seeing a big repatriation from clouds back onto premises
Yeah.
as people look at sort of these different models. So, our data has never been more important. And the way we use our data with the advent of AI, it's the metadata, right? The data about the data is almost more important than the data. So being able to trust that data and being able to understand where that is, you need a different set of circumstances where you save that data. And I think that's what we're here to talk about today.
And there's one other thought that just occurred to me too, and you're going through that, Sterling. There's a really good chance that in the last 3 to 5 years, because of just how much churn and shift has happened in our industry, the person who bought the hardware that you're using today is probably no longer with the company. If we're being honest with ourselves, you're going to find yourself in a situation where you as the partner are going to be talking to someone fresh-faced and new. You might not know what their needs are. You might not know even what they're looking for. So it's really important to consider just the buyer mindset as a whole and how different things are. We almost have to go back to kind of playing detectives in discovery mode to see like, hey, what do you actually need as part of your hardware refresh? Because just re-upping you on the same thing is not the answer.
Yeah, I totally agree with both of you guys. And one of the things that jumps out to me too is density. And when you look at historical backup targets, density for long-term archival, back to your point, Sterling, before everybody started going to the cloud, this is something that potentially you would buy for on-prem. So it could be something like a JBot or NAS as tier 1, and then something like a deduplication device as tier 2 to make sure that you've covered all your bases for a fully on-prem data retention policy. But with the advent of cloud and more adoption of cloud and object storage like S3 and Blob and Microsoft's cloud, more and more people started tearing off to that cloud for the long term. And just like you said, Sterling, there's been a lot of people that have brought that back on-prem for one reason or the other. So now you're looking at, okay, how do you make sure that your data is not only protected from outsider attacks, whether that's ransomware, viruses, but also insider malicious bad actor attacks on-prem. A lot of customers, unfortunately, don't have the bandwidth to go to the cloud, may have all the money in the world, but physically can't get what they need to the cloud due to location. So there's a lot of different reasons why the buyer mindset that we've been talking about 3, 5, 7 years ago probably is entirely different than it is today. I mean, all you got to do is look at the latest news of ransomware attacks from right, left, upside down, backwards and forwards. We're getting hit from every different angle, all different verticals. So having immutability and having that ironclad vault on-prem is absolutely critical. And, Anthony, one of the things that just occurred to me that we haven't kind of set the stage with, because we may have some new viewers, is exactly what does Object First deliver from a repository option for Veeam customers?
It's a great question, Matt. So, you're right. We did set the stage. So let's talk a little bit about us, right? Like if this is your first time on the stream and you've just heard of Object First in passing, welcome. The thing you got to know about us is if you know about Veeam, you already know a little bit about Object First. We share the same founders. 17 years ago, it's been a while. Veeam was founded to be the best data management software to handle VMware workloads. And those two individuals who founded that company saw a need about 6 years back when they started to see ransomware creep up everywhere. And specifically when ransomware started to attack the backups and said, hey, we're going to do this all over again. We are going to build a backup storage repository that's purpose-built for Veeam that is going to be ransomware proof, just out of the box. And that is exactly what we deliver. The product is called Ootbi, which is a fun name to say, but it actually has some meaning. The same way that Veeam stands for VM, Ootbi stands for out of the box immutability. And what we deliver is secure, simple, and powerful storage. It's secure because it's zero access to root. It's hardened out of the box by default. It's simple, takes 15 minutes to rack, stack, set up, and use. And if you don't believe us, check out Matt and I's video on YouTube where we do a whole unboxing to production of our product. And then lastly, it is powerful. We designed this thing specifically to be purpose-built for Veeam. And what that means is we didn't have any other vendors in mind when we built this. So we built it specifically around the SOS API. It is built for fast ingest. And more importantly, knowing how ransomware acts today, it has been designed for supercharged instant recovery, meaning up to 20 VMs running simultaneously on a single node, supporting up to 80 on a 4-node cluster. So we've put together something that is really compelling to the Veeam admin, especially if they're looking to refresh their hardware on something that's a little more robust and a little more purpose-built for Veeam.
One thing I'd like to add in there too is to everybody who's listening right now, when you're going to talk to your customers, the game has changed. Everything touches security now. It used to be sort of a little more siloed. You had your storage admins, you had your backup admins, you had your server admins. Right now and today, when they're considering a refresh or honestly an out-of-band purchase because they have to cover a gap that they're having, we'll talk a little bit about what some of those gaps are to look out for. Just understand that they're thinking about things that they didn't have to think about 2 and 3 years ago. Our Veeam backup admin, they're doing a lot. They're doing restores, they're watching storage, they're making sure their backups are going successfully. A lot of times they're having to burst to cloud with another stream. So this is a way that they can make sure they are covered with true immutability by just plugging in something and setting it up for 15 minutes. So that's literally what we're bringing to them with that value and why that's so important, because now they have to adhere to a whole new set of policies.
Yeah, no doubt. And one of the things when you look at some of these reasons, if we start kind of going into what potential hardware refresh reasons may exist to cause the out of band, like you talked about, Sterling, what about compliance with immutability with the rise of ransomware? And when you look at some of these legacy storage solutions that, we've all seen and used in the past, file and block and iSCSI connections and old repurposed SANs, and even things like hardened Linux targets,
Right.
at some point, someone has to configure those. And sure, they can be hardened and people can take measures to implement security best practices. But one of the things that Anthony touched on earlier that I find so uniquely different about us is not only is it immutable out of the box, and funny quick side story, Veeam was pretty successful having 5 letters in the name. And how many does Ootbi have? 5. So, right. So it's almost like we were a, match made in heaven. But, you've got immutability out of the box, but also the zero access to root is absolutely critical. I mean, this means when the unit ships from the factory, there are no levers you can pull. There are no RAID sets to provision. There's no stripe sizes to worry about. There's no IQNs to connect. It's literally turnkey ready to go. And with the rise of ransomware, more and more of these companies are being required to have immutability for their on-prem backups.
That's right.
What easier way to help them accomplish that than a turnkey solution to allow them to check that box without any additional overhead or management? And to me, that's one of the main reasons I'm seeing. I don't know about you guys.
No, absolutely. I think, our audience being y'all, the partners today, the thing that's in the back of our mind always is how can we help you succeed at the end of the day, right? How do we get your customers more satisfied and delighted through the product that we've created, Ootbi? Thanks, Matt, for putting that on the screen. Be sure to scan that QR code and go to check out our partner community. We love y'all and we try to give y'all every advantage we can. But in thinking about the reasons people are refreshing their storage, I mean, the obvious one is renewal, right? Someone's coming up on a renewal. It's been 3 to 5 years, and they're now saying, "Hey, I've got to come up with I got some budget. Do I continue down this path or do I go look at what else is out there?" For y'all, I think the most important thing to keep in the back of your mind is kind of what we set up in the beginning. If someone's on renewal of something, we're talking about a decision that was made 3 to 5 years ago.
Yeah.
What has changed in that amount of time? And as part of this renewal conversation, is this solution still a good fit? Ootbi, we just launched this thing this year. It is brand spanking new, which also means it's up to date with all the latest security and technical sort of wizardry that is required of a modern storage solution. We think about things like compliance and now underwriting for ransomware insurance, the requirements that certain vertical slices like SLED and healthcare are now having to have immutable storage for their backups. There's a lot of different reasons to really consider and think about, hey, is this refresh going to work with what's already there? And to the partner portal point, be sure to go in there, check out all the material that we're providing you. And a lot of the questions they may be asking can be answered by the material we're putting out there for you. But just something I wanted to throw out there. And I'm curious, Sterling and Matt, if you had any additional thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just want to throw in there that we're here to help. It's a new twist on a conversation you may already be having, with the customer. But these are some of the things that our customers are actually thinking about, and so when you go in there and arm yourself with some of those questions about, what are some of your insurance and some other things that we'll be discussing here, in the future, they're being asked these questions. They're really being held to task on how can they recover? Do they know if they can recover? What happens if certain data sets go offline? So these are things that we all have to arm ourselves with in our industry to make sure that the customer is getting some of those answers that they really need.
Yeah. So speaking of answers, I wanted to throw up this question that came in from Eric. So right now, we're providing a 2U on-prem appliance. So there are no VSAs or any virtual editions currently. So it is a 2U appliance that would go at the customer site. We have a 64 terabyte and a 128 terabyte node size. And currently at the time of this recording, which is almost December 23, we have a self-imposed 4-node maximum cluster size limit. So if you do the large size nodes, that's half a petabyte of usable capacity. And that's at the time of this recording. There's no technical barriers. That's the self-imposed limit, walk before we run type scenario. But hopefully that answers your question there. So all this stuff to say, I feel like when you look at the old storage technology, it's always been file or block. I feel like the object storage is kind of the new era of backup targets. Now, Anthony, we've talked about this at length on other, episodes of the live stream, but I think it would not do our audience service if we didn't at least mention a bit about it on this one. Is historically object storage has been for off-prem, the cloud that we talked about earlier. But when you're looking at backing up on-prem, this is new to a lot of folks. Object storage has not always been the initial go-to target for Veeam backups for all the reasons that we've touched on. Recovery performance that's absolutely critical to enable things like instant recovery and data labs and all the goodness, that Veeam's been innovating. Just because of the way the metadata works, and a lot of these vendors have to run erasure coding, and that slows things down. I think it's important to mention to our potential partners that we don't need erasure coding with Ootbi. You can drop as one simple node on site based on the customer's needs. So really 64 terabytes would be the bare minimum, all the way up to the 4-node cluster that we talked about. And Anthony, you dropped this point in earlier, but maybe you can double down on it a bit on that SOS API integration. I know we just recorded a video on that, but that's absolutely unique to the Veeam customer base. And, we're the only on-prem hardware vendor that fully takes advantage of that.
It is. And I think to your point earlier, Matt, a lot of people associate object storage with cloud storage. Yeah. And it's not because it is some kind of cloud native technology. Just a little bit of, education in case you weren't aware. Object storage is just a different way to logically handle storage. When we think about file and block, it's a very hierarchical, or they're very, what is the word? Not hierarchical, but like programmatic. Like block is very sort of, maximized for writing sort of linearly and taking up blocks of space, where object storage was designed to be a storage type that is non-hierarchical. Essentially, every piece of data that lands inside of object storage is an object. And because of that, people started using it for tagging metadata for AI generation, or because it was being used by cloud vendor technologies, it's cheap and deep storage. But no one had ever really tried it or seen it in the on-prem form factor. So some stereotypes started to get made about object that, it's slow, or it's cloud only. And that's just because that was the most modern use case. Everyone was using it for these sort of things. They didn't really consider, hey, what if we could put this on-prem in a box? Now, to your point about the SOS API, and the reason why I went on that tangent, SOS is designed for direct to object storage. It's taking advantage of every single bell and whistle the technology is offering as a communications protocol. Veeam is sending over these smart entities, which we are able to consume. They land on our storage target. we are one-to-one, glove in hand optimized for these read-write operations.
That's right.
What that means is we've created something that is both modern, it is efficient, and it's purpose-built. And the other thing I will add to all this is object storage also brought about a very unique and nuanced technology, which was immutability. Yes, the idea of immutability has existed for a long time in worm type storage. Only in object storage do we have the ability to turn on what's called compliance mode. Every other storage technology out there will give you some kind of out, some kind of administrative privilege that basically says, hey, I know you said this was worm, but I'm going to let you unlock it so you can delete some data. And that just won't stand in modern times where attackers like to pose as everyone on this call to see if they can get in your environment.
Yep.
So true immutability in compliance mode means there is no level of administrative privilege that can go in and delete that data. Especially when paired with a hardware device that's zero access. I mean, there's no backend, operating system, root, shell, any kind of way to get access to the underlying operating system.
Right.
That's true immutability. That means the data cannot change. And that's really a game changer when it comes to backup storage. So pairing that with the SOS, you start to see how what we've created truly is the best storage for Veeam.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, when you start to balance out performance, speed, density, ease of use, you know, some of the other things that you may be hearing from some of your customers are, I created my own hardened Linux repo, you know. Well, think about when they need to do updates. They have to unharden that repo to do those updates and harden them again. The point is that you have that attack surface when it's unhardened, and you could also make mistakes there. We want to do what's best for the customer and make it easy for them to do that. So once again, the game has changed, and the way we were doing things that were fine before just don't matter up, match up with these attacks today.
Yeah, you're right, Sterling. And, you know, speaking of, you know, being designed for Veeam and how we work with Veeam, as far as the go-to-market strategy, you know, I have to share this comment. Appreciate this, Brian. You know, Brian's just talking about he's one of the channel managers out west in Arizona, and partners are loving us. So that's awesome. We appreciate the comment there. Thank you for tuning in, Brian. I think it's important to reiterate that we only work with Veeam. So, you know, if you're selling Veeam, if you've got a large, you know, Veeam customer base and you're looking to expand that, you know, Anthony made this point earlier, same founders that founded Veeam founded us. So who better to design a storage solution that's uniquely designed exclusively for Veeam than those two guys, right? So I do think it's a match made in heaven. So what are y'all's thoughts, you know, as we kind of close things out on just the overall Veeam alignment and just why that go-to-market strategy is so useful to our potential partners that are watching?
For me, it's got to be the familiarity, right? Like, you know, you already know us. You've seen us all on the call here today. We're open. If you want to have a conversation about Ootbi, Object First, how we work with Veeam, all you got to do is reach out, and either ourselves or many others be happy to have a conversation with you on everything we've talked about and a whole lot more. And we're driven to do this. Like when we succeed, sorry, let me reverse that. When Veeam succeeds, we succeed, right? We only work for Veeam. So being a purpose-built company, it's crucial that we partner with individuals like yourself, because without you, we cannot sell. And we are a direct to partner company. We don't do any direct sales.
Yeah, absolutely. We know that Veeam is really the champion's choice. You know, it has the absolute best sort of customer world. They share ideas. They push things forward. In many ways, Ootbi and Object First is an answer to some of those things that we know that they needed. When we talk about, you know, over half, I think, of the attacks last year, included some exfiltration of data. You know, these are some of the things that keep some of them up at night. So just the fact that they can take solace to know that they can put an Object First and Ootbi in, and it will go dovetail directly into that Veeam environment, use the SOS API, and they don't have to worry. That's another thing off of their list that they can go and check that compliance. You know, we love talking about this stuff. I know we're here to help. We will join any kind of call that we need to really help proliferate this message. But Veeam is number one for a reason, and Object First is number one for Veeam for those same reasons.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And just kind of closing out with some final thoughts, I'll share mine and then we go around the horn and we'll wrap this session up. But, you know, for me, one of the things I really wanted to end with, since the whole effort here on this stream is to talk to you, Mr. or Mrs. would-be partner, I know we've all had this challenge before where you get the finger pointing game. If there's ever an issue, well, it's the hardware, well, it's the software, well, it's the virtualization stack. One of the really nice things about Object First and Veeam is we've already built in the back channel communication between our support department and Veeam's support department. So from a customer perspective and you as the supporting partner standpoint, that's just one more bonus for your customer. If there were to be an issue, regardless of which side it's on, it's a seamless transfer on the back end where the customer's not just sitting there holding the bag like I'm trying to ask for help and everybody's just giving me the runaround. So I feel like that is another huge bonus. And really the only other thing I would share on that same general topic is we shared earlier the box to backup playlist. I'm going to pop it in there once more actually. And yes, this solution is really simple to deploy, but that doesn't mean you have to abandon services. So if you want to wrap some services around this, it could be a larger scale investigation on hardening the entire Veeam deployment, right? We're just one step in that overarching security landscape that really needs to be assured, not only from the Veeam standpoint, the Veeam components, if there's different servers, if they've got proxies and repos deployed at different places, firewall security, all the other things that you could wrap a services play around. We would just be one part of that. Also could be a velocity motion, right? You sell 2 or 3 of us, for the time you would sell one legacy solution and a whole day of implementation services, you've made more money anyway that way. So, I'll pitch it to Sterling. What are your closing thoughts before we wrap things up?
Yeah, indeed. We're here to have the conversation. We know that they're doing more with less today. The main key here is to reach out to your customers. And some of those reasons to reach out, just like Matt was talking about, would be to look at their environment, make sure it's hardened. What are they doing to harden that environment? Asking them those questions. We always want to make sure we're bringing the value to the customer and helping them either with the services, whether it's Ootbi, whether it's hardening the entire environment, or whether it's starting to have an educated conversation of what their infrastructure should look like for the next 3 years. Yeah. Now is the time to do that. I think in the first half of 2022, there was over 236 million ransomware attacks. I mean, listen, there's a reason why we all sound alarmist around here. Yeah. We're data management people, but this stuff is happening, right? And so we want to do the best by our customers to make sure that they have the information to arm themselves. And that's what we're all about here at Object First.
Totally agree. Nobody's immune, right, Anthony?
Darn right. Nobody, not even me. I think I've been a victim more than anyone else. My closing thought is simple. It's actually around simplicity. We pride ourselves in how easy we are to use. And I hope that you would find the same to be true. So when you think about Veeam, think about Object First.
I love it. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If we can be of any assistance, any help whatsoever, I put the email address across the screen earlier. It's simply info@objectfirst.com. Feel free to reach out for any reason. We would love to partner with you guys to help push Ootbi to more of your Veeam customers. So with that said, be sure to follow us on the socials, subscribe to us on YouTube, and we will see you guys on the next stream. Y'all have a great week.